stainless steel sector. Its investment activities in the metal and commodity segment globally further pushed up the stainless steel raw material prices, which in turn got reflected in stainless steel prices. Demand recovery coupled with strong operational performance and consistent deleveraging measures led to a good Q4 for us. Our agile business strategy continues to help us align our exposure in domestic and export markets. Building on the Q3 trend, even in Q4, we focus more on the domestic market due to steady demand across key segments. Efficient production planning, inventory management, and supply chain strategies have continued to help us in mitigate the market challenges effectively. The fourth quarter demand was driven primarily by segments like auto and a healthy revival in demand from pipe and tube segment along with railways and allied infrastructure. Demand from segments like elevators and lifts and hollowware segment also remains strong and is likely to continue. Localization effort by the government and the company's initiative for innovation helped the demand for special grades in auto segment to grow in Q4 FY21. Sales of Jindal Stainless SPD division grew by 8% in Q4 FY21 over the corresponding period last year. With further push on indigenous production and expected economic recovery, healthy demand is likely to be generated in the future as well. On the industry front, as I mentioned, demand has been robust and is likely to remain so with gradual easing of restrictions and with steady vaccination progress in India and other countries as well. On the policy front, revocation of CVD has not been encouraging for the industry, primarily for the MSME segment. The industry has been closely engaging with concerned authorities for imposition of CVD and ADD as per final recommendations by the DGTR. Globally, almost all countries either already have or are being in the process of implementing trade restrictions to protect the interests of their domestic industries. We believe that the government of India, with the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, will address this issue to provide a level playing field to the domestic industry. With this, I would like to hand over to Anurag to discuss the operational and financial performances. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhyuday. Good morning and warm welcome to everyone joining us on the call today. As Abhyuday mentioned, we are doing this joint earning call this time as the merger process is going well and it will be easier for you to understand the performance of the two companies. We have uploaded our investor presentation on our website and I hope that you have already gone through of the same. Despite many challenges, our performance has been robust in Q4 and in FY21 as well. However, without going into the individual performance, let me give you a holistic view of the proposed combined entity. You all know that COVID-19 has had an adverse impact on our performance as we had shut down our plant for more than a month during Q1 FY21. A strong recovery in demand coupled with our risk mitigation measures, however, helped us in offsetting most of the negative impact of Q1 on the volume and revenue during the remaining part of the year. Our quarterly operating performance has been improving gradually since Q2 to FY21. During the last 9 months till Q4 FY21, i.e. Q2, Q3, Q4 of FY21, the combined pro forma revenue grew by 17% YOY basis. On a standalone basis, the pro forma combined revenue of FY21 is seen at rupees 19,175 crores. Strong business sentiment, improved pricing backed by increasing raw material prices in our flexible business strategy as narrated by Abhyuday has helped our EBITDA performance. For the last 9 months of FY21, including Q4 FY21, the pro forma combined entity EBITDA surged by 52% year on year. For the FY21, the standalone pro forma combined EBITDA stood at 2,408 crores, which is an increase of 20% over FY20 on full year basis. I am pleased to inform that our continuous and focused approach, we now have a robust balance sheet. Despite COVID-induced challenges, we have done accelerated and efficient deleveraging and reduced our external debt by 1/3 over last 1 year. This helped us to bring down the pro forma entity debt equity at 0.5x at the merged entity level, which is one of the best in the metal sector. Pro forma debt to EBITDA at the merged entity level has also dropped to 1.3x at the end of FY21. Pro forma merged entity now net debt stood at a combined entity level at rupees 3,125 crores. With a stronger financial position, we have received a rating upgrade by the major rating agency, which is CRISIL, and which they have given us that straight away 3 notches up from BBB+ to A+. The rating is based on the healthy business and financial profile, improved operating performance, efficient working capital management, and deleveraged balance sheet, which is adding to the liquidity as narrated by them in their rating rationale. As far as the merger process is concerned, as Abhyuday mentioned, it is progressing well to create a SS conglomerate with 1.9 million ton capacity, having a strong global footprint and pan-India presence coupled with a strong financial positioning. We expect the process to be completed as per our earlier timeline which we have guided, which is H2 FY22. In conclusion, let me reiterate that the merger will put us among the top 10 global players with 120 plus product range, along with value-added specialty product range, which will help us to cater all the segments with auto, railways, metro, consumer durable, infrastructure, etc. Along with this, a very lean and flexible supply chain will help us to quickly switch our product range. This will give agility to quickly alter our product mix, segment mix, and geographical mix to de-risk the business model as mentioned by Abhyuday. This brings me to end of my address. I would now expect the moderator to open the line for Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Amit Dixit from Edelweiss. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. And at the outset, I would commend you for laudable efforts towards COVID-19. Really very, I would say, helpful. I have 3 questions. The first one is on your EBITDA per ton guidance. Now, we had been given the guidance of 14,000 to 16,000 rupees per ton. But in last 2 quarters, we have exceeded that guidance, particularly in Q4. We have exceeded it quite a bit. Now, first, what are the key drivers of this, outperformance, and whether in light of the stainless steel prices currently and outlook, would you be revising this guidance in FY22?
Yeah, so basically, Amit, you are absolutely right. Last few quarters we have been delivering very strong performance. So overall, year-on-year basis, we would still not say that we will be continuing all the quarters at the same, because there would be some up and down cycle which could always be expected. Having considered that, we are now revising our guidance from 15 to 17,000. So we are increasing to the 15 to 17,000 range on a full year basis. Though quarterly, some of the quarter performance will be higher, but we are confident on full year basis, then we'll be able to deliver 15 to 17,000 EBITDA per ton. This, considering any challenges or some other challenges come even during the maybe Q2, Q3, any time point of time. But we would always like to meet our guidance in terms of what we are trying to guide to the market.
Okay, fair enough. The second one is on essentially import pressure. So after revocation of CVD and ADD, what kind of import pressure we see post-April? I mean, you alluded to this in your opening comments, but if you can quantify it a bit, that would be helpful. And what is the rationale that you are hearing from government for, revocation of such duty? And what are the bottlenecks that you see ahead in kind of, reinstating these duties?
So one thing, Amit, which we as an organization have been focusing for very long, because we know duties can be there and they can be removed, as we saw already, and we really don't want to depend our position and our company performance on these kind of duties. So clearly, we are focusing on segments where imports will not come. Major imports from China is coming in the 200 series, and that is also an area where we are not very strong in hollowware and in these lower segments where they supply for utensil segment. We are actually not present in a very big way. Only about 8% of our sales or even less goes to that segment. So we are not drastically impacted. There is obviously sentimental pressure, I will say, but in terms of the segments that we focus on, and because of our strong position and our unique supply chain that we've created, imports, we don't see it becoming such a big challenge. It's more sentimental that these pressures come, but we focus more on industrial segments where approvals are required. We're focusing more, auto segment now. Railway has picked up again, which anyway we have a major market share in all these areas. So that is going to continuously become and going to be our focus in the coming years as well.
Okay, and the idea of, so the question was that you might be discussing with different ministries, and also what kind of rationale you hear from them the first place, because if it is harming MSME segment, I'm sure that might not be the intention of government to go for revocation of these duties. And what are the bottlenecks that you're facing at this point in time? Because see, this is a very big, I would say, hangover for the overhang on the stock rather at this point in time.
Correct. So the Steel Ministry is completely supporting, and they are in agreement with our plight. So as discussed earlier, by September is a window that they've given us to reappoint these duties. Whatever they revoked in Feb, they could reappoint that in September. So we are working very closely with them. We're sharing all the data, and we're sharing the import data with them, how much is coming from all these countries where duty was supposed to be established. So we're quite confident that by September, some of these duties should come back. But again, I said, we are not basing our performance, and we are not saying that with the duty being there or not being there, our performance and our numbers will dip.
Would you have handy the data on imports post-April, or I can take it from Gautam and post the call?
We'll share that with you. I'm not exactly, it's not there with me at the moment, but I think Gautam, please share that with Amit.
No problem. The third and last question is on essentially, the demand side, particularly in domestic market. In Q1 FY22, do you see demand weakening a bit? So to that extent, what kind of export proportion would you guide for Q1? And since you have reduced production to supply oxygen, would it impact your sales volume as well in this quarter?
Mr. Sood, you can take that one up, I think.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that up. Good morning, everyone. Yes, just to start with the first question. The oxygen, what we are supplying to hospitals and for medical purpose, is not impacting much our operations, because what we are supplying is liquid oxygen, which is roughly 3 to 4% of the total oxygen we are producing. The gaseous oxygen we are using in the and it is not impacting at all. Second thing is in the Q1, yes, just to be on the safer side, we see that demand can fluctuate from the domestic market. We are keeping slightly more of volume for exports, and export volume used to be about 15%. We are targeting to take it to 20%, just to eliminate any risk from the lower demand from the domestic market. What was the third question, if I could?
No, so the question was that, no, it's fine, that's fine. The question was that what kind of, volume can we expect in Q1 FY22?
See, Amit, Anurag here. Let me pitch in one thing here. I think as we mentioned that we would be flexibly playing because we have developed now our supply chain and production lines in such a flexible manner. So depending on the demand and product range, we'll be keep playing between the geographical mix also between export and domestic market. So as Mr. Sood mentioned, like when we saw some of the initial surge in the COVID cases, we were not sure whether nationwide lockdown could happen. We actually increased some of our export mix in the booking at that point of time so that our volume remains on track. Overall, I can tell you, I think rather than looking quarter on quarter, we are saying that let's look at FY22. I think our export volume, given the current outlook, should remain in the range of 15 to 20%.
And what will be the total volume like in FY22? Anything you would like to tell?
We are targeting a volume growth of around 20% plus as compared to FY21. So we should have at least 1.7 plus 7 million ton at a combined entity level together.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. I have more questions, but I'll get back in the queue. Thanks and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Ashish Kejriwal from Centrum Broking. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. Only one question from my side. All others have been answered. What's up? We have not divulged any details yet on capex. So one is on that. Are we seeing any delay in that because we are already getting delayed on capturing the market share, maybe? Or one is on that, and is there any possibility of inorganic expansion also? Thanks.
Abhijit, shall we go ahead, or do you want to answer?
Yeah, I can answer a little bit. So basically, capex plan for the next 2 years is to the tune of around 3,000 crores, and mostly this will be through internal accruals. And this year, the outflow that we are planning is to the tune of around 1,100 to 1,200 crores only. This is mainly to double our capacity, and we will take it up currently from not double, but it will increase by 0.9 million, I can say, our melting capacity. So from current levels of 1.9, we'll be going to 2.8 million. And we are also increasing our hot rolling and cold rolling capacity as well. And in terms of delays, there are no major delays. There is little hiccups because of, these lockdowns that are happening. But the kind of systems we have put in place and the kind of operating leverage and the basis that all been created, we can recover this quite fast as soon as things normalize by June, I feel.
So have we started ordering, or we will start ordering from June?
We have already started ordering.
Okay. Secondly, on inorganic expansion too? Any plans for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashish, sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Abhijit, go ahead. I think I didn't hear.
No. From inorganic expansion point of view, definitely there is nothing on the table as of now, but there are few assets that we will definitely look at if and when Salem comes up for sale, and there are further smaller assets which will only add to our value chain. We are not looking at, acquiring anything outside our business or some other asset like that, but stainless steel assets which add value to our business, we'll be looking at that as and when time comes. But as of now, there is nothing major on the card. Anurag, has anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you have answered. So that's what Ashish, depending on, as you know, there are limited assets which are there, but we keep evaluating, and if we like something at the right price and which could be more EBITDA accretive to our business, surely we will look at it. So as Abhijit mentioned, we have really structured our balance sheet in a way that technically, if you see our scheduled debt repayment, we have actually repaid so whatever debt reduction we have done very strategically. We have prepaid our FY22, FY23, and we are right now in the process of paying FY24 installment. So FY22, we have only between at the merged entity level only 76 crore of the scheduled debt repayment. So technically, we don't have any of the debt servicing obligation remaining in FY22, and similar is the case with FY23. All this will lead to a straightaway free cash flows for us, which we want to effectively utilize for our capex plan to improve our capacities as well as the cost efficiency. And also at some point of time, depending on if inorganic opportunities come, or otherwise we will continue to do accelerated further deleveraging programs to reduce our debt further.
Sure. That's helpful. So lastly, only, is there any number in your mind below which we will not go in terms of net debt to EBITDA?
See, net debt to EBITDA, currently we are running at 1.3. And if you recall, last time we said we would always like to keep below 1.5. That's what our target. We are already below that target. And we continue to be maintaining. Obviously, our endeavor to keep it further down. But I think guidance-wise, we'll always like to keep it much below 1.5.
Okay. So the reason why I'm asking is the kind of volume guidance or EBITDA urban guidance which we are giving and the kind of organic capex plan which we have. In fact, there are enough rooms for us to further deleverage balance sheet unless and until we go for any inorganic expansion.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. Perfect. Yes.
You answered it well, in fact, Amit. So if there's no inorganic growth opportunity, as I mentioned, deleveraging will continue to accelerate at pace.
Sure. Thanks, and all the best.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you. Before we take the next question, a reminder to the participants, please limit your questions to 2 per participant. Should you have any follow-up, may we request you to rejoin the queue. The next question is from the line of Bhavin Chheda from Enam Holdings. Please go ahead.
Good morning, sir, and overall, congrats to the management team for excellent turnaround in both the companies, and I think the merged entity is looking much more stronger. So few questions. I think first on the margin guidance, which you said 15 to 17,000. If I heard correctly, you're building in conservatism for the second half, right? The current margins, despite the anti-dumping not being levied, are running strong, but you are building some conservatism for second half, right? If I heard you correctly.
Yes, correct.
I would like to look at this way. We are right now just probably 1.5 months in the new financial year.
Yeah.
And the guidance which we would like to give, it's not that we keep revising, as you know, consistently last 2 years. In fact, when nobody was knowing even COVID will come, we still, even despite the COVID, met our overall year guidance. So it's not that we would like to come back suddenly with the external and giving excuses to the external factors suddenly and say that, okay guys, now COVID has happened and my guidance gets reduced to this. So if you recall, even last year FY21 guidance, we still maintained despite the COVID, in even in our Q1 call itself, that when outlook was looking very bleak. So frankly, we don't know how the things will pan out. Considering all these factors, I think obviously we would like to maximize the EBITDA, as Abhyuday mentioned. That's what our target in terms of the operating efficiencies, kind of flexible supply chain which we have planned. But I think I think we should have a guidance at 1.5 months within the financial year with the 15 to 17,000 on an overall year basis.
Yeah, sure. That's a healthy number. Second, on the capacity debottlenecking plans from 1.9 to 2.8 you mentioned. So I believe that would be in a phased manner, and yes, then any timelines of when incremental 0.3 or 0.5 million will start kicking in? How are you phasing this out?
Mr. Sood, you want to answer, sir?
Yeah, I will take this. Just to answer this question, we would be commissioning the entire project by September 2022, and then there will be natural ramp up of the production facilities, and by March 23, we should be attaining the figures what we are giving, 2.8. Okay.
So you're saying September 22 roughly when we complete this project. And you said you are increasing hot rolling and cold rolling to any number to hot rolling and cold rolling capacities from?
Yes,
we are expanding.
Yeah, as you must have noticed that we are expanding our steel melting shop capacity by almost 0.9 million ton. So we would be actually implementing the similar kind of hot rolling capacity implementation plan as well. So it will be putting up
Bhavin,
relating capacity.
Mr.
Then,
just one second.
Sorry.
So, Bhavin, as we said that we are in the process of and started gradual ordering. I think give us a quarter's time and we will come up with a firm way how we will be doing the various plays, because we are still in the midst of negotiation and the process. But as Mr. Sood mentioned, that's what our targeted timeline overall. So I think by next earnings call, we will be able to give you more firm detail what kind of capacities and what kind of equipment we are getting into.
But just to give you the number, the matching HR and the CR capacities will be added in this phase. Okay.
The matching CR also, because I believe CR won't be equivalent to the HR right now also.
Today we are at around 50 to 55% of CR capacity of melting, and it will remain so after this entire capacity acquisition.
Sure. And any update on a couple of our subsidiaries? Mainly we have a CR mill in Indonesia. What's the update there? How it is operating? What the profitability there? That's one subsidiary. And other is the Jindal Lifestyle, how it has been doing and what are the plans there?
You would like to take it up? Huh?
Yeah. Maybe Indonesia, you would have seen that we have really made a good turnaround in Indonesia in last 2 quarters. So Q3 and Q4, because we did quite a few strategic change in Indonesia. One is that overall entire their cost structure and fixed cost structure we have aligned to a lower production volume, because there we were seeing sometime challenges from even Chinese imports. So one is that we have made it more agile, our entire cost structure, so that even if the volume drops, we get into a profitability zone. Second, we started sourcing the raw material which earlier we used to supply from India, from the local Indonesian player, which is we are obviously getting in for us to a more cheaper than as compared to the Indian materials. So that's the second part in this. And third, we have also improved their product range to make it to cater to high-end products, and especially the US and other European market export range. So all these have resulting in a good profitability zone. So maybe number point if you want to know, I'm sure or we can share with you that in this quarter we did a PBT of EBITDA of 23 crore in Indonesian subsidiary, and in Q3 we did a 30 crore of EBITDA in the Indonesian subsidiary PTJSI. We can share with you, Gautam, and can share with you the full detail of full year basis. Full year basis also, if you see, Indonesia has delivered in FY21 a 38 crore EBITDA, which was a 38 crore loss last year. So there is a good swing of almost 75 crore plus between in this September because of the measures which I explained to you.
What's the volume run rate there? I think the mill was 50,000 ton CR mill, right?
Yeah, so right now, as I told you, that more than the volume, we are not targeting the volume. That's why, Bhavin, I was trying to explain you that our entire focus on Indonesia has shifted from not the volume to the high-end product range. So we are not trying, because so that this is despite the much lower volume, we have managed to get a much better profitability.
How
And lifestyle I can take up. Lifestyle, basically last year the performance was a bit subdued only on account of railways. Railways, because we are the major suppliers to railways, and all 3 coach factories either were closed or had drastically cut their production below 50%. So that was the reason that lifestyle was a bit subdued. But this year we see very strong performance coming, because Whirlpool, which is one of our biggest customers, we're the biggest customers to Whirlpool in a particular segment, that they have doubled their requirement from us. So now quarter on quarter we'll be supplying almost 9 lakh bowls to them. We have added 2 new OEMs as well. Tata Motors has been added as a OEM with strong products we're going to be supplying, and also Havells is another OEM that we have added recently. Plus, we have similarly to Tata Motors, we're working on adding Ashok Leyland and Eicher Motors as well. So these OEMs are long-term partners. They give us good EBITDA margins, and they will continue for many years to come. Plus, railway is back up as well. So with these two segments coming back up and strongly, lifestyle performance will definitely be very strong this year.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Vikas Singh from Phillip Capital. Please go ahead.
Good morning, sir. Congratulations on good set of numbers.
Thank you.
Sir, I want to understand that our quarter-on-quarter debt has increased close to 200 crore despite back-calculated cash flow should be somewhere around 200 crore higher. So is it we are suffering on the working capital side or there is some other reason behind it?
Because there is a reduction also in the quarter-on-quarter, because if you see the numbers, obviously some part of short-term debt has increased because we have repaid more on the long-term debt. But overall, if you see the fund-based long-term, short-term, there is a reduction on quarter-on-quarter basis also.
So what would be that amount, or if you can tell me?
So overall, like what we said is that our gross debt number was close to 3,200 crore and net debt number was 3,100 crore on the merged entity level. Maybe Gautam and Shreya, maybe one of them can send you the reconciliation of these on quarter as well as year basis.
Yeah, basically I was referring to your presentation and the net debt number which I was talking about on a quarter-on-quarter basis from 2,600 crore jump to 2,800 crore basically.
No, I think there is maybe we will send you the number. I think that's not. They will send you there is a continuous reduction in that. Though quarter four the reduction was lesser, I must say that, because we accelerated more from in quarter three itself, and then quarter four we actually tried to pick up more on the short term side.
Okay, sir. So my second question pertains to our capex. So when we are talking about the matching CRC capacities also, the current capex guidance which you have given includes that capex, or that is over and above what we have guided so far?
It includes that. It includes
okay,
everything. So when I said, when Abhyuday mentioned the 3,000, which includes capacity expansion and some of even the operating efficiency capex also. So it's a combination of this. Therefore, I mentioned that as we are still in the midst of the planning and finalizing it, I think by next quarter we'll be able to share more specific details on this.
Okay, sir. And lastly, if I may ask one more question. So have we got any inventory benefits, or more or less it's negligible for us? If you could share that details with us.
Interesting question. I know. So if you recall, earlier we used to have probably a much higher volatility in some of these because of the underlying raw material up and down. But as Abhyuday narrated, actually the focus we have done in last 2 years is mostly on our supply chain sourcing, getting the raw material sources near to the plant, and the entire sourcing strategy which Mr. Sood is leading on this part. So what we do is that now we monitor all these exposure on a almost real-time basis of our net exposure of commodity, depending on what kind of product mix we have sold on that particular week or quarter or particular day, and what kind of booking we are doing through the various incoming chemistry on this part. So depending on that, what we said, like for example, if you pick up one of the raw material, we mentioned to you that typically we would like to maintain the range of 6,000 to 7,500 million ton between these two companies of overall, because that is to give us the flexibility of supply chain. So any point of time, the movement may not go beyond these, because we then make sure that our exposure remains always within this range and gives enough headroom and flexibility to play with our product mix, our supply chain. So I would say, rather than getting into specific of quarter-on-quarter inventory number, I think that's the way we have transparently shared that this 6,000 to 7,500, which is nickel, is the most volatile, is our range. Similar thing we do for other raw materials also.
Okay, sir. So our guidance basically is not factoring in these changes, and mostly we are factoring in the X of these kind of fluctuations, right? In terms of EBITDA per ton guidance?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
So in EBITDA per ton guidance, we are actually building that kind of the modeling, right? That the inventory gains or losses would not be there.
Absolutely
Yes.
right.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, sir. That's answered my question. Thank you for taking my question, sir, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nishit Shah from Equitas Capital. Please go ahead.
Good morning, sir, and congratulations on very good set of numbers. And I really appreciate our fight against COVID by supplying medical oxygen. Sir, I have 3 questions. First question is, I recently read that ferrochrome prices have gone to 80,000 because of lower demand from stainless steel players. So how much our production is impacted because of the second wave, and how much do you see that for the industry?
I think Mr. Sood, that should be for you to take it up.
I just could not hear it. I have some network problem. Can you
On the ferrochrome prices. Ferrochrome prices have gone down to 80,000. Better if Nishit, you only repeat your question.
Yeah, sure. So, sir, I recently read that ferrochrome prices are down to 80,000 because of lower demand from stainless steel players. So, one, how much is our production impacted in last few months? And the second, how much do we think that the industry production is affected?
Okay, Nishit, if I could answer your question correctly, this ferrochrome prices are more so driven by the Chinese demand prices. If the Chinese demand goes up or goes low, actually it drives all these ferrochrome prices. Okay. Because most of the ferrochrome what we are producing here in India, it also gets into the production of China and Southeastern Asian countries. So the demand at India has not gone down. I'm not sure I am audible.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the demand in India has not gone down. It is just effect of Chinese demand. And any other question? If I could answer your question.
Okay. So my second question is that recently we heard that significant steel capacities have gone out in China because of some change in regulations. So are you aware that any stainless steel capacity has gone out?
No, what we have heard from China, whatever information is available, the small size plants, they, for the reason of actually curbing environmental concerns, having environmental concerns, and having better pollution control systems, temporarily they have been put out of operations. Otherwise, none of the stainless steel plant have been put out of services or put out of operations. It is only just to maintain the inventory levels. They are trying to optimize the production. That's all.
Okay. And so my last question is, I want to understand, are we facing any significant cost increase or availability issue for any of our input commodities?
See, the problem is the strong disruption in the shipping industry. So most of our raw materials here, like nickel, iron scrap, the stainless steel scrap, we are actually sourcing from countries like the region like Europe, US, and Southeastern Asian countries. So there is a lot of disruption, and this disruption has led to a sharp increase in the shipping prices, shipping cost. So one way it is the challenges in the availability, and another way it is increase in the costing. But the demand side, actually there is a very strong demand, so it is offsetting the the increase in the shipping cost.
Okay, got it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Ashav Rakesh Patel from Molecule Ventures. Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on phenomenal set of numbers. I also witnessed the balance sheet cleanup, and I would appreciate, because none of the companies I've seen have cleaned up the balance sheet in such a fast manner. I had two queries. Both of them were finance related. First of all, from JSL console numbers, the cash outflow has been towards debt repayment, cumulative non-current and current outflow has been 830 crores. But when we are trying to tally that in the balance sheet, from the non-current portion we have reduced 123 crores, and from the current portion we have reduced 132 crores. So cumulation of 255 crores. I am not able to match the remaining 574 crores of debt repayment in the balance sheet. So can you please help me out? How is it classified?
Sure, we can send you the reconciliation. Basically, the current and non-current quantification in the balance sheet is in the long-term debt of residual maturity of less than 1 year or falling installments in the next 1 year actually are into current asset side. So maybe we'll give you I will ask Gautam Shreya to give you the reconciliation of this.
Sure, that would be very helpful. And the second question is that if you see in PNL, we are incurring finance cost of 480 crores, but actual cash outflow is only 340 crores. So the difference of rupees 140 crore, is it pertaining to JSHL's ICD which we are incurring but not giving out, the cash flow is not flowing? Is it the case? And if that is the case, how do we plan to repay it to JSHL, or it would be adjusted in the merger itself?
You are right on your first part. It is because of that, and as we mentioned, our merger scheme provides for cancellation of this entire loan along with the interest. So that's how the merger scheme was drafted. Therefore, since now merger is just corner away, so that's how this will get cancelled in the merger process. So I think the best way, that's why I covered in my speech as well as Abhyuday, is that to look at the combined entity numbers.
Sure. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Navneet Bhaiya from an individual investor. Please go ahead.
Hi, Abhyuday and Anurag. Congratulations for a wonderful set of numbers quarter on quarter.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One, what is your combined market share of the two entities right now in India?
Anurag, I think it's above 8,000 crores now, 8,400, 8,500, I believe.
Yeah, frankly, I haven't checked this today's CSI. So if I see just now 4,650 is the JSL market cap showing, and 4,370 crore is for.
Sorry, I was talking about the market share, not the market cap. I was talking about the market share of your stainless steel products in the market.
Oh, I thought you were talking about market. Okay.
So we have about, you can say about 55% of the market share, 55 to 60%, and it varies segment to segment. But overall, we can say about 55%, or 50 to 55%.
Okay, and you see adequate growth in the industry to absorb the incremental capacity that you're putting up in the next 2 years?
Yes, definitely. We might even run short actually, because stainless steel is the fastest growing metal. It's growing almost at 8 to 9%. And with the infrastructure push that is given by the government has come up with some very good policies also to support stainless steel. Like one example I can give you is that any government project has to now calculate the life cycle costing before using any material. And when that is happening, or when that is done, then stainless steel is always the clear winner. So over the course of a project, stainless steel cost will be recovered almost double or triple times as compared to other materials. So these policies with the infrastructure push given to the government, and this, another thing that we have seen all across the world is that as the economy improves, as the GDP improves, the per capita consumption of stainless steel also improves. So India is at a very low level of only 2.6 kg per capita. World average at 6 kgs. Developed countries, if I talk about, are above 18 to 20 kg per capita. So India that way has a very long way to go. Railways completely stainless steel, switching over to stainless steel. Auto with BS6 norms coming in, stainless steel requirement in all two-wheelers, commercial vehicles, passenger vehicles, all has increased. So if we see in terms of demand side, there will be very good, robust demand, and that we don't see as a problem at all with the capacity addition. Plus, export market is available to us. We are the best in class quality. We compete with everybody in their own markets for quality. And any dip in domestic demand, we can easily substitute and supply to Europe, US. Russia has become a very important market for us. Korea is opening up again. So we see no issue from our capacity addition side.
Okay, that's quite helpful. My second question is, in fact, regarding the export competitiveness of the company only. I believe your export competitiveness has increased in the last 2 or 3 years. So, one, what really has changed? And then if we are export competitive, then how does import dumping really, affect the industry? If we are competitive at a global level, then imports should not affect us too much, right?
So, see, domestic market is still our strongest market. That is where we have created a huge supply chain efficiency. We created warehouses all over. So that way we don't feel imports will impact. It's more sentimental. That once people start importing and prices are a bit lower, then that just creates a negative impact from a sentiment point of view. And why we've been able to export is again because of our quality. We continuously work on our yield improvements, cost reduction, efficiency improvements. But the main reason we're able to get a good EBITDA is because of our quality. We are we are one of the best. We're supplying almost, biggest supplier to Gillette. We're supplying to auto industry all across the world. So that is the main reason why we're able to get good EBITDA margins. And people don't treat us like Chinese products. If a Chinese company has to go sell in Europe or US, they really need to cut down their margins, really need to cut down on the price because they don't meet the quality standards. But because we meet the quality standards, we have a robust system in place. That is why they end up giving us that margin as well.
Okay, so ex of China, what would our rank be globally? Ex of China?
In terms of stainless steel production, we are number 2 in the world actually. After China, India is number 2 now.
No, Jindal Stainless you mentioned the combined is among the top 10 global manufacturers.
Top 10. Combined entity will be in top 10.
So ex of China, if we remove Chinese manufacturers...
Ex of China, we'll be in top 5 then I would say.
Okay. And our export EBITDA is comparable to our domestic EBITDA on what we sell in exports, or is it lower or higher?
It fluctuates again. It depends on market to market, economy to economy. But you can say over the last few months, we've actually seen a little higher margin from export.
Okay, interesting. Okay, all the best. I think you guys are doing a great job for the company. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Saket Kapoor from Kapoor Company. Please go ahead.
Yes, Dhanyavad sir for the opportunity and congratulations on doing all good things sir at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, if I could just summed it up what the conversation we are having, sir. What likely should be the EBITDA pattern on the export part, sir? Is it incrementally higher than a domestic one?
So you are now. See, there are few. Yeah, no, you can take this one.
Yeah, Saket, basically, we have given a company-wide guidance as a 15 to 17, and as we mentioned, we want to keep a flexibility between our export mix and domestic mix depending on the margin. So, since we have our very flexible product range and flexible production lines, we will always be trying to keep push to our products in the market where we at that particular time gets a better EBITDA. So it will always be keep moving. So it's difficult. So like for giving the example of the auto two-wheeler, probably in FY19 they were not having a good profitable margin business. But when the first lockdown opened, we saw that the auto manufacturers were ready to give a better price. So we actually pushed into auto or in India itself, and then we reduced our export. Similarly, but even in Q1, when Indian market was slow, we actually pushed mostly into the export market because Europe and Russia was giving a good margin and taking a good offtake. So I think that's the way to look at it. Overall, let us manage the mix between these two. Overall, we said our guidance is 15 to 20%. What we are looking at as a mix. As Abhyuday mentioned, our priority will always be domestic market. That remains for us. And overall, we will be able to give a share on a combined basis of 15 to 17,000 of EBITDA per ton.
Right, sir. So now with the serious exercise of debt reduction that has happened, what should be the absolute finance cost number, sir, for next year? Just a ballpark number. We have seen a significant reduction for this year, and now going on and with this rating upgrade also, sir, we should be looking for revision in the rates downward also.
Yes. So next year, interest cost should be less than 400. In fact, it should be somewhere around 375 crore number. And because we will be targeting that, so that's almost 40% sort of further reduction in our current cost.
It's a combined one, 375.
Combined one. I'm talking about combined interest cost.
Okay, and it's a reduction of 40% from this current year numbers.
Yeah, close to 40%. It will be, I can tell you that if you see.
I'll work out the math, sir. No, not an issue for that. And sir, as you told that we are managing the inventory by in the best way. So, sir, just a ballpark number on an year-on-year basis, how has this inventory gain or loss played its part for the last financial year? If basic understanding you can give, just to understand the vagaries we used to face earlier. And now with the changes the team has done, what should be the likely number on an year-on-year basis, sir? How has the inventory movement attributed to the P&L?
Saket, as you mentioned, the EBITDA guidance which we are giving, as Abhyuday mentioned, obviously will be considering any of the volatility which we keep getting. We never know what kind of volatility. So that's how we should be looking at the numbers.
Right. And lastly, small points. One is in how are the prices for the? So I think the stores and the spares have seen an inflationary trend Q1Q. So what factors have attributed to it? And so and currently, sir, how are the graphite and the ferrochrome prices faring, sir?
Maybe Mr. Sood, you want to take this question?
Yeah. The store and spares, I would say there has been a very tight control over the inventories, and this is being reflected in the balance sheet. You have seen the numbers. And about the graphite electrodes, Saket, graphite electrode has been steady at around below 300 rupees per kg level. And in future also we see it is going to remain so. So I think that was the last question of graphite electrode.
Okay, sir. And lastly, sir, since now the pro forma basis we are giving us the presentation, it would be more comforting for investors if we get subsidiary updates also separately in the presentation, mentioning the volume, the EBITDA numbers, and the significant highlights, which as Abhyuday sir has highlighted about the Whirlpool story. So if that would also be just
that's a good point. Gautam, please take care of that in the future. Even I agree with Saket.
Yes, sir. That would be really very helpful. And sir, for the capacity expansion part, sir. Okay, I just conclude. 1,100 crore capex which we are doing, the entire amount will be spent for this financial year itself, sir. I just missed. And when the capacity will come in, sir. Susta was telling me, but I missed that.
Capacity, it should be commissioned by September of FY23, I believe, right, Mr. Sood?
Yeah, the total plan, Saket, is not 1,100, it is about 3,000 crores. And this year, the guidance is 1,100 crores. Partly, we are going to spend towards that capex. Okay, and this commissioning of this new project will start coming up in September 2022.
Okay. So there will be no commissioning for this year. 1,100 will be spent and capital work in progress on this.
No, not for this year.
Okay. Right. Thank you for the.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Chetan Shah from Abacus Asset Management. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, sir. I have a two quick questions. One, in terms of the capex, if you can give us any. Does this 3,000 crore also include the capex we will be doing in our subsidiary? Or that separately over and above this?
Sorry, Chetan, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand that this 3,000 crore capex which we talk about is our parent entity. Is there any plan to do any capex in our subsidiary, both in terms of Indonesia and lifestyle entity? If you can give some flavor on that.
Chetan, let me say that this 3,000 is, as we said, it's still probably in a planning stage. It's not a firm number. It's not a rounded off number, something like that. Because if we get an approximation range, as we have been saying, that approximate this could be the capex, but it will be phased out into payout will be phased out in 20 to 24 months. Subsidiaries may also do some of the smaller capex, but considering this, like Indonesia may not be doing much of the capex this year at least, but still they may be doing some of
subsidiary, no major capex for this year at least.
Sir, my second question about this new capex or new capacity of 0.9 million ton. Will our focus be more on a better value-added product? So I'm just trying to understand that if my current capacity of 1.9 gives us on an average 15 to 17,000 rupees of EBITDA per ton, can my new capacity give me on a little on a higher side if everything remains steady and it has a better return and a cash flow opportunity vis-a-vis our existing one, or have I'm thinking like too much ahead of time? So just to get your sense on that, please.
So see, in terms of because of our again strong fundamentals, continued focus on cost reduction, and our strong brand name that we get, we definitely feel we'll be able to maintain this EBITDA totally if continuously if we are focusing further on cost reduction, yield improvement, which should happen, more use of liquid ferrochrome, better, cheaper domestic raw materials if we get, then definitely we'll be able to get a higher EBITDA margin as well. So, market is growing very strong and segments are growing strongly as well. And then I don't see any challenge in maintaining this EBITDA margin at all.
So just one last question and maybe a small suggestion. If you can do it in our annual report of the merged entity, if we can articulate our dividend policy, because we are kind of out of the woods and no major financial burden in terms of utilization of cash flow which we will generate, and also in terms of our future capital expansion. If you can give some sense on what will be our dividend policy going forward, this will give us some confidence as a shareholder and also idea that how the going forward the cash flow will be utilized at an entity level. If you can throw some light on that.
That is definitely on the card for us. From the merged entity, we would like to pay out some dividend. So Anurag, if we can incorporate
yes,
that.
so maybe it's as Abhiday mentioned, and it's a good thing. That's what we will do once we get to a merged entity balance sheet. Once the merger is complete, I think we will surely look into your suggestion and incorporate that.
So just one last suggestion from my side, if possible. Most of us try to grapple with getting the right performer number, and in our PPT, it is just a 2 or 3 data point has been given. If you can share to all of us, or maybe to exchange the exact performer P&L and balance sheet, will help most of us to take care of things going forward. Rather than keep disturbing your team for a few small data point. Just a humble suggestion, sir, please.
So, Chetan, if you see, I think just to be clear on this, I think we have shared revenue, EBITDA and debt number there, because since former numbers, because both the companies are separately listed, the full P&L cannot be published that way. I think besides this, if you have any number, I think please let us know what is the number you need.
No problem, sir. No problem. Thank you so much and really appreciate your time. Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Vishal Chandak from DAM Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. So my first question was with respect to the merger. Do we foresee any merger synergies coming into play over here in a significant way, given that these two operations are at a distinct locations?
Yeah, Anurag?
Yeah. So, see, the merger synergies, Vishal, as we mentioned, is that mostly the immediate synergies were mostly on the balance sheet side. So, in terms of the overall interest cost, what we are doing in terms of the crossover, ICDs, cross-holding, and all these will go away. And that will be more a balance sheet optimization side. P&L side also, there would be some synergy. I would not say immediately the large, but surely I think going forward and as we get into a more into the early capex spending, that will you will start seeing a more P&L level synergies also, and maybe economies of the scale, cost efficiencies getting reflected in P&L. But immediately, yes, the benefit of merger was more on a stronger balance sheet side.
Got it, sir. So my second question was with respect to the capex. You mentioned that your total growth capex for the next 2 years would be 3,000 crores. Does this reflect only the expansion at Jajpur, or it also includes the capex that we have already announced on the SPD division at Hisar?
SPD capex is more or less now completed and it's an end. So I think it will be maybe some of the residual payments will be there, but it's not much actually. And this is mostly into the Jajpur brownfield expansion, some of the cost efficiencies capex.
Great. So would that also include the maintenance capex, or if you could just help us with the maintenance capex?
Maintenance capex will be beyond this probably. I think that typically we run a maintenance capex between the two entities in the close to range of 250 to 300 crores.
Got it, sir. Sir, you also mentioned that we are looking at assets within India for an inorganic expansion, and given the fact that we have close to 50% plus market share in the domestic market, aren't we likely to hit antitrust blockhead the moment we put up anything for merger or acquisition?
That will be surely a part of the diligence and with the pre-approval whenever it's such situation arises from proper CCI or something approval. Those will always be sure with that. As Abhyuday mentioned, it's one of the large assets is probably is the Salem only.
Correct.
That is any government divestment, so it has to come with that comfort level.
Because that would also mean you would cross close to 65-70% of stainless steel capacity market share.
Not that straightforward because we analyze that part also. It's market-wise, it's a segment-wise. It's really not that overall segment, geographic, even north, south, west, something like that. So there are much more to this actually when we looked into it. But yes, means that will be surely with the any inorganic will be with the proper due diligence and the approvals on this part.
Got it, sir. And sir, if I may squeeze in one last question, with respect to any, do we have any deferred tax asset in our balance sheet still which can be used up, or we are now back to cash tax now?
We have some left. Maybe we have some left, but in FY22 probably depending on the EBITDA guidance we are giving, it may get exhausted in between. We'll ask Gautam to share with you the deferred tax asset. Gautam will share it.
Sure, sir. And thank you very much, and wish you all the best, sir, for a splendid performance for the quarter, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as there are no further questions, I would now like to hand the conference over to the management for closing comments.
Yes. Thank you so much. I would like to thank everyone for attending this call and for showing interest in JSL and JSHL. The complementing strength of the two companies would continue to improve our market positioning, supported by the strong growth in demand which is expected in the future. I hope we have been able to answer all your questions. Should you need any further clarification or like to know more about the companies, please feel free to connect with our investor relations team. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us on this call, and we'll ensure that all your good suggestions and points will be incorporated in our next call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of DAM Capital Advisors, that concludes this conference. We thank you all for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.